it's Michaela and you're watching FunsizedStyle. Today's video has been a long one in the making. For a while there, I felt like I was doing a lot of chit-chat videos, and so I didn't want to bore you guys with that, even though those are some of my highest viewed videos, so I guess that means you guys like those. But I also like to produce a wide variety of content. I've also been doing quite a few makeup tutorials lately, and so I wanted to switch up my content a little bit, and it's been a few videos since I just sat and chat with you guys. I guess it hasn't been that long, but for me it seems like it's been a while. Today's video has been a long one in the making, and something that I have wanted to talk about for a while, and almost ever since I started my channel. And I don't really know why I haven't filmed it sooner. It's just one of those things where I always have ideas of videos that pop into my head, and just whatever I feel like filming that day, I guess. But as my channel started growing over the years, I obviously didn't start with 38,000 subscribers. It grew over time. Having an online presence teaches you a lot about society's view based on your circumstances in your life. As my channel started growing and I started gaining an audience and an engaged audience, a topic of comment was, especially since I've been featured on several documentaries, videos from Inside Edition, Pop Sugar Beauty, Right This Minute, those kind of docu-style videos. One topic of conversation or comment was always my wheelchair. As a society, I've known this for quite some time, but when I started my channel, it made me realize truly how many people have this perspective that many people view me having to use my wheelchair as a tragedy. They view my wheelchair as a part of me. They view my wheelchair as a topic of conversation. They view my wheelchair as a restriction. They view my wheelchair as a form of a visual of a challenge, and they think that because I utilize a wheelchair that my life is restricted, that my life is sad. And you guys know I made a video talking about how society views disability, specifically my disability, Osteogenesis Imperfecta. I talked about that, how society views my circumstances as a tragedy. I wanted to talk about specifically the use of a wheelchair and what the use of a wheelchair means for people with physical disability. In that video, I talked mainly just about my disability as a whole, of how people view it, but again, I wanted to talk specifically about my wheelchair because I received all kinds of comments throughout my childhood, and obviously being in the online community, how sad it is that I have to be confined to a wheelchair. We all know, or those of you that have gotten to know me well through my videos can only imagine, I bet, how much I love that phrase of being confined to a wheelchair. So today we're going to dive deep into that. And I also asked you guys on Instagram if there were any questions that you guys had about this mobility device and about life as somebody that utilizes a wheelchair for their mobility and for their ability to live a productive lifestyle. Today I am breaking down the myth that somebody that utilizes a wheelchair is confined to a wheelchair. Common question that many people that utilize wheelchairs receive is, do you sleep in your wheelchair? Do you sleep all night in your wheelchair? They think that we never leave our wheelchairs and that this is truly our life and that we are truly confined to this piece of equipment. But today I wanted to talk about how I view, and I would say how most people that utilize a wheelchair view the use of a wheelchair. Depending on your reasoning of needing to utilize a wheelchair, whether that be short term or long term, or some people only use a wheelchair certain times of the day. Some people only utilize a wheelchair for certain activities or long distances. And some people acquire disability over time, whether that be from a progressive condition or from some kind of accident. Depending on what stage in your life you started utilizing a wheelchair, your view may be different. For example, for somebody that's been in an accident and maybe had a spinal cord injury, their use of a wheelchair, at least at the beginning stages of their journey as somebody with a spinal cord injury, it may feel like a restriction to them because they know what it's like to live without needing a mobility device. They know what it's like to be able to walk up a flight of stairs and be able to go anywhere without having to worry in the back of their mind if an establishment is wheelchair accessible. So I also want to be realistic with you guys and be honest with you guys, for those of you that, and maybe there are some of you watching that have needed to acquire the use of this mobility device over time and maybe endured a spinal cord injury or any other kind of accident that may require you to use a wheelchair now before you did that. And so I'm not naive to the fact that not everybody has the perspective that I do, but I also want to share my perspective as somebody that has utilized a wheelchair for almost her entire use and what the truth is about it. There's many different steps in their recovery process mentally that somebody may go through that has acquired disability over time, that they need to accept the fact that this is their new way of being mobile. I also wanted to just mention that as well. I am fully aware that many people don't use a wheelchair for most of their life, and many people with physical disabilities do not necessarily always have had to use a wheelchair their entire life, and many people with disabilities acquire their disability later on in life and are not born with their physical disability. I started using a power wheelchair when I was 3 years old. I know that seems incredibly young. I'm not really sure how my parents determined that I was ready. I guess they just had me try it out, and surprisingly, I didn't crash, but I was very responsible at a very young age, I suppose. From then on, I started using it when I was 3 years old, and so for reference, I am 21 years old now. I don't remember at what point, whether it was right after my 3rd birthday, right when I turned 3, or right before my 4th birthday, but I have used it approximately about 18 years now. This is my primary source of mobility. This is the way that I'm able to live my life independently and freely, and makes my life possible. Without my wheelchair, or any type of wheelchair, I would be stuck in bed all day. I would need help with everything and anything. Hello, I'm filming.
Hello? Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. What's up? Without my wheelchair, I would not be able to live the free and independent life that I live because of my ability. It restricts my ability and mobility to walk, and I have chosen to utilize a wheelchair full-time as opposed to walking. And there are many perspectives in my mind that I made that decision. That's a whole nother video, because a lot of people compare, a lot of you guys follow my twin brother Austin on Instagram. A lot of you compare him and I because we're twins, and as you'll notice, he utilizes a walker as main form of mobility, and I utilize my power wheelchair as my main form of mobility. I get a lot of questions as to why he does that and I do this kind of thing, and that's a whole nother topic for another video. I think people see that and they see me as less independent. The reality is, for people with physical disabilities, their wheelchair is their lifeline. Their wheelchair is their ability to live. Their wheelchair gives them the ability to have freedom, to be independent, to live successful and productive lives. People view having to use a mobility device of any kind, especially a wheelchair, as a form of restriction. And that's just the wrong way to look at it. My wheelchair gives me the ability to live and to see the world and to live a productive and successful life. And it goes back to something I talk about frequently on this channel. Society says in order to live a happy life, you have to have this certain set of circumstances. You have to have these physical abilities. If you lack those things in any way, your life is more sad than somebody else's, or your life is less. People feel bad for you. And that's just ingrained in society's brains for so long, that disability is viewed as a tragedy. And I just wish there was a better way I could describe it, but it's viewed as less. Because I have less physical ability, I lack joy, or I lack independent, or I lack important things in my life. People view physical ability as important in life. Oftentimes I think about when I talk to parents that have children with OI, and the doctor tells them, I'm sorry that your child has this diagnosis. I'm sorry that your child will most likely need to utilize a wheelchair for most of his or her life. And that just breaks my heart that that's the way that the parent is presented with their child's circumstances. It's not a tragedy. It's not sad. People have the ability to walk is put so high up on a pedestal, and if you're not able to do that, then that's just so sad. I knew I would have a difficult time articulating my thoughts in this video, and the reason to that is because I've utilized my wheelchair my whole life, basically. I don't know any different, and I haven't had a progressive condition. It's something that I have just had my whole life. In some ways I've improved. I have fractured less. It's difficult for me to tell people that it's not a big deal that I have to use a wheelchair, because I've always viewed it that way. And what I'm telling you today may be a whole different perspective that you've never heard before. I hope that this can help people change their perspective on someone's use of a wheelchair. A comment that I get a lot is, you're really a happy person for somebody that has to use a wheelchair. Or you're really beautiful for somebody that uses a wheelchair. You're so positive despite having to use a wheelchair. You never ever say to somebody, you're so happy because you have the ability to walk. You're so inspiring because you have the ability to walk. You're so independent because you have the ability to walk. People don't say that to people that have the ability to walk. An able-bodied person doesn't go up to another able-bodied person and just start having a casual conversation about how awesome it is that they have the ability to walk, because it's second nature to them. That's how most people live their lives. But for us with physical disabilities, the use of our mobility device is second nature. In order to achieve independence, society views this as there's only one way, and that is through the ability to walk. But independence can look very different for so many people. Independence isn't just the ability to walk. Independence looks so different for so many people. I'm struggling because this is a difficult perspective for me to talk about, because this is my life, and I guess my biggest thing in making this video is, just because somebody utilizes a mobility device doesn't mean that their life is sad. People view the use of a wheelchair as a barrier. They view the use of a wheelchair as a restriction, and oftentimes in the news media, when they do stories on people with physical disabilities that utilize a wheelchair, they use that ever so famous phrase of being confined to a wheelchair. When I think of confined, I think of not being able to get out. The definition of confined doesn't mean not being able to walk. Nobody that I know that utilizes a wheelchair is confined to their wheelchair. We don't sleep in our wheelchair. There's so much I could say about it, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about it, but I want to answer some of your questions. I will say this, my wheelchair acts as my legs. People don't start conversations about someone else's legs. That's just super random and weird. Again, it's my freedom, it's my lifeline. I wouldn't be able to do all the things that I've done in my life without my wheelchair. It just wouldn't be possible. I wouldn't be able to travel around the country and visit Times Square, be in New York without my wheelchair. The use of a wheelchair for somebody with a physical disability is freedom. It is not a barrier. It is not a restriction, but it gives somebody their life. It gives them the ability to live a productive and successful life. Without it, they would be confined, most likely to their bed, and they wouldn't be able to go out and live productive and successful lives the way they do with their wheelchair. So I'm going to go ahead and answer some questions that you guys asked about using a wheelchair, and I think that this will also give me a better idea as to what you guys want to learn from my lens. First question is, does being in a wheelchair make certain things easier? Also, you're super inspirational. Thank you so much. So not only does using a wheelchair make things easier, it makes things possible, because without my wheelchair, I would not be able to be independent whatsoever. I would need help with everything and everything. I would not be able to go places. Like I said, would not be able to travel around the country, to do all these super cool things. My wheelchair gives me the ability to do what my legs don't do and what my body can't do. So it makes my life not only easier, but it makes my life possible. My life would look so different if it wasn't for my wheelchair, and it's my freedom, it's my lifeline, it's my legs, it's my key to independence. It gives them the ability to be a member of their community, just like anybody without a physical disability. If you follow me on Instagram, I've been exercising using my manual wheelchair every single day. I'm trying to get my body as fit and as strong as possible for spinal fusion, whatever that may be, and halo traction. I'm using that to be as physically fit as I could possibly be, because I cannot do regular exercises, of course, but utilizing a manual wheelchair is something that I'm able to do. You'll notice some people utilize a manual wheelchair and some people utilize a power wheelchair. Even especially within the OI community, there's so many of us that utilize a power wheelchair as their primary wheelchair, and then there's so many of us there's so many people that utilize a manual wheelchair as their primary wheelchair. And that goes based on a lot of things. It goes based on children who are like 3, 4, and 5, or even 6 maybe, like, use a manual wheelchair because their parents can just help them and push them and help them get around, and it's just based on preference. For the parents, maybe they think their child isn't ready or isn't responsible enough for a power wheelchair. Even for adults with OI that utilize a manual wheelchair, a lot of it's based on preference. The type of wheelchair that somebody utilizes is based on many different factors. The reason I may utilize a power wheelchair over a manual wheelchair primarily could be different than someone else's reason, and vice versa. Even within mobility devices, the reason they choose to utilize one primarily more over the other varies on their lifestyle and their physical ability and what they're looking for and what they are looking to gain most. This is why I'm glad I asked you guys to ask me questions, because through these questions it brings more thoughts to my mind, because something I love so much is educating about disability, but it's also one of the most challenging things because it's not challenging to educate, it's challenging to know what to educate on and how to articulate it, because this is my life, because I don't know any different. I've never once in my life not had OI. For somebody, like I said, that's acquired disability over time or later on in life, it's much easier for them to give people perspective because they have something to relate to the audience that they're speaking to. They once had the physical abilities that their audience has, so they know what it's like on both sides. But for me, I only know my side. This is the only life that I've ever lived. The reason that I utilize a power wheelchair primarily over a manual wheelchair is because I feel like it gives me so much more independence than a manual chair. And again, this is all based on personal preference. It doesn't mean that your child should utilize a power wheelchair over a manual chair if they have OI. It doesn't mean that. These are just my preferences. I have a manual wheelchair. I'm actually going to do a whole video on just that wheelchair, why I got it. So I do have both, but I've utilized a power wheelchair primarily my entire life, well, since I was 3. And the reason to that is because since osteogenesis imperfecta causes fractures, obviously there were many, many points in my childhood where I was not physically mobile whatsoever. I would not be able to physically maneuver a manual chair because of an arm fracture or a leg fracture. It's much more comfortable to be in a power wheelchair, at least for me, when my leg is fractured. In a manual chair, my power wheelchair has seat recline, and then it also has the ability to tilt. The features of a power wheelchair have really helped me navigate those times in my childhood when I would fracture often, and it still gives me some level of independence when I do fracture. My parents are able to get me up in my wheelchair, and then I can still help myself for certain things, like, you know, reach things in my bedroom and brush my hair, brush my teeth, make myself food. It still gives me some level of independence, even when I'm lacking independence the most. A manual wheelchair would cause me more pain when I fracture, and it just obviously wouldn't be physically possible if my arm was fractured. I feel like I've been on YouTube forever, but you guys don't know that point in my life. I just started YouTube when I was a child, obviously. And you guys have seen videos of me in arm casts and things like that from surgeries, but never really like a fracture, if that makes sense. By the time I started YouTube, my fracture days were very limited. After I hit puberty, I have pretty much stopped fracturing. It's been a hot minute, and I'm grateful for that. Like, carrying things is so much more difficult when you utilize a manual chair, at least for me. Again, this is all from, like, my perspective, because you have to use both arms to maneuver the chair, and I don't really have a lap to, like, set things on. Even, like, in my kitchen, trying to make food, like, in my manual chair, it's very hard, because I can only grab, like, one item at a time and bring it over to the table. With my power chair, I only have to use my one arm to use the chair, and then using this arm, I'm able to grab multiple things at once, set it on my footrest or something, and even though fitness-wise, it's not as good for me in that way, independence to do daily living things are so much more important to me. It overpowers all of that. Even though our house is set up for us, my mom and my twin brother utilize a walker, so even though it's set up in that level, things are still, in my opinion, much easier to reach. Sometimes I have to help Austin or my mom reach things because they're a walker or something like that. And I just feel like it just gives me so much more independence around my house, being able to do those things. That's why I utilize a power wheelchair the most. I'm able to reach things and just do basic things that are just easier to reach, easier to do, and quicker to accomplish. And the reason, like I said, that I got a manual wheelchair is because I realized that I was like not getting any physical exercise. I still wanted to have that and have that ability. A power wheelchair breaks down. It involves electronics. It breaks down, and it breaks down, I wouldn't say frequently, but it's happened enough to where I especially felt like I need some kind of security. So that's why I got a manual wheelchair. It at least gives me the ability to like get out of bed, be somewhat independent if my wheelchair breaks down. And so it's just really nice to have that backup, to have that security. security if my power chair breaks down, because if my power wheelchair broke down, I would have to utilize my mom's, and hers is not set up for me whatsoever. She is taller than me, and her chair is just not set up for me. It's very uncomfortable. It hurts my back. I really needed to have that custom, and so I hated using her chair when my chair would break down, and I would not leave the house when the chair would break down because I hated using her chair, so I wouldn't, like, it was just too uncomfortable. I paid for my manual chair out of pocket because insurance doesn't pay for both kinds of wheelchairs. They used to back in the day, about 13 years ago. They used to, but not anymore. And I understand that to some extent, and I don't think wheelchairs should be completely free, but it is pretty outrageous. And so I did pay for my manual chair out of pocket because a power wheelchair is more expensive. Obviously, that is what I wanted my insurance to pay for. I went on a whole tangent there, and that's why I answered some of these questions in between, because giving my history and like why I use certain kind of mobility device over another. Another thing that came to mind is just because somebody ambulates differently, whether it be walking or utilizing a wheelchair or a cane or whatever you may use, like, that doesn't mean that their life is sad. They just happen to ambulate differently. Another comment that I received was, I would be so sad if my child had to use a wheelchair. Like, that must be so boring or so exhausting to have to be in one chair all day long. And this is the only life that I ever know. I do miss out on things. I focus on the things that I can do, not the things that I can't. And I'll kind of go into that in a minute here with these other questions. What do you do when a place you need to go is not accessible? The reality is I don't go. I can't go. I talked about that also in how society views disability and the importance of businesses following the law, the Americans with Disabilities Act. So many businesses are not compliant with the law whatsoever. Most businesses view the Americans with Disabilities Act as an optional law to follow, and it's not. It's mandatory, but most businesses do not follow the law. That's just the reality. And business owners that are not accessible, I'm calling you out. You need to be, and you're missing out on an entire demographic of customers, and you're only hurting yourself, and you're only hurting your business financially by not following the law. Even though it may cost you initially, it will boost your business by a lot. Right now, if you're not compliant with the law, you are missing out on an entire demographic of customers, because people with disabilities are average citizens that go out and live their daily lives and in their community just like anybody without a physical disability. When an establishment is not accessible, I do not go. I can't. Like, there's literally no physical way. If you guys missed my most recent story video, I did go to an extreme measure to attend a event at a restaurant that was not accessible, and I did an entire story time video on that, so I'll have it in the iCard. Other than that time, I've never gone somewhere that's like not accessible. Like, I just can't. There's no physical way. And it makes me sad, but I just come to the realization that's how life is, and many business owners don't value people with disabilities as important customers, or they don't view us as necessary to deal with. They don't view us as anybody we need to worry about, because we could just go somewhere else and they don't want to spend the money. I don't really know what it is, but like I said, business owners, I'm calling you out. If you are not compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act, you are only hurting your business financially. You can't just take your legs off if you want to. And my wheelchair is my legs. I can't go anywhere without it. And another point to my wheelchair is my legs phrase that I say, I know the airline industry is a huge problem for people with disabilities that utilize a wheelchair. I have had my wheelchair damaged by airlines countless times, more than I can count on one hand, simply because many people who are in charge of managing and taking care of the wheelchair after the person is on the plane does not view it as an item of their own, and so therefore they are careless with it. They are reckless, and I know that's a strong word, but they are reckless with it. They don't view it as important. They don't view it as somebody's leg. And so oftentimes when I fly, I tell the person that's going to take care of my wheelchair, I guilt them by saying, my wheelchair is my leg. Please take care of this. I can't be without it. Sometimes the guilt trip works, other times it doesn't, and they're still reckless with it because they're in a hurry and they just want to get it done. But in the end, it ends up costing the airline so much money because they have to pay for the repairs, and it causes so much disaster. Like, I remember when I went to Orlando, Florida about 5 years ago now, I got off the plane and the airline completely damaged my back wheel. When I got off the plane, I noticed right away that it was damaged, because when I would go, the wheel would like start to go to the side, And like, so I would go sideways, and then sometimes I would go straight. I was just in tears because it's just so frustrating, because you literally just feel like your legs are ripped out from underneath you when your wheelchair is broken and done intentionally by someone else. It's so disheartening that people don't view my lifeline as important. It's so disheartening when I have to put my trust into somebody that I know doesn't care about my wheelchair, and they don't realize the magnitude of the effect that it has on my physical, emotional, and mental health when I don't have my wheelchair. The anxiety, the anger, the disappointment. And granted, I have had some really great people that have taken care of my wheelchair, and more often than not, it's damaged in some way, shape, or form, whether it be majorly or minorly. But that doesn't stop me traveling. It doesn't. I know it stops many people that utilize a wheelchair from traveling, but it doesn't stop me, because I love traveling. It's my favorite thing in the world. It brings me so much freedom. I love traveling. I love everything about traveling. It gives me the adrenaline high, but I would say that's one of the most difficult parts of utilizing a wheelchair is airline travel, because I know I'm entrusting my leg with somebody that doesn't care what happens to it when I get to my destination. And that's the most disheartening part. It's something I'm always going to have to deal with. I feel like the airline industry is never going to change in that way. The people that are managing it, they don't have any incentive to take care of it. They don't get reprimanded when it's damaged. They don't care. They don't care what happens when I'm at my next destination, because at that point, it's out of their hands. I've dealt with some really ignorant people when traveling that say, I'm sorry, too bad. Like, because it's not their life, they don't have to worry about it. Because it's not their legs, they don't have to worry about it. They get to wake up every day, get out of bed, and travel the world without any physical barriers. They could care less. That was my random tangent on that. As far as going to places, businesses that are not accessible, I can't. It's not possible. Do people think you can't do transfers by yourself because of your wheelchair? So I don't know, but the reality is I can't transfer myself. That is the one physical thing that I'm unable to do by myself. I'm able to cook myself meals, get myself dressed, literally do everything but transferring. I don't know what people think, but the reality is I can't. That's the one physical thing that I still need help with. Hopefully after my back surgery, I will work on being more mobile. I'm always going to have someone with me when I shower, when I move out. That's just one area where I think it's just really important for me to have somebody there. As far as like getting in and out of bed, I still need help with that. But again, after my back surgery, hopefully I'll be able to work on that and be stronger, and my body will be in a better physical state. But the reality is I can't do transfers, so I don't know what people think, but that's how it is for me. How do you get dressed if you need help? How do you dress if you need help? Bathroom, going to bed, taking showers, entering cars, etc. This question confuses me very much. I do need help getting into bed, and I do need help getting in the shower. I take baths, but we have a bath chair. But once I'm in the bath, I'm able to do everything myself. Most of the times I have help with doing my hair, but that's about it. And entering cars. As far as entering cars, the only vehicles I can enter are ones that are wheelchair accessible. Now when I move, what's really cool is I'll have my manual chair. Where I want to move, I have lots of friends, and so I will be able to take a car seat and take my manual chair and be able to go out to brunch with friends if I want to, and have that ability, where here I don't really do that because I don't have friends that I really trust to be able to lift me and things. But all my friends down there are in the medical field, and so they do that stuff every day. And so that's really cool. I'll be able to do that, go out to dinner, and they can pick me up, and then also I can purchase my own car to have my friends drive me. The last question that I received is, what is one positive experience by another person that you've had about your wheelchair? I don't know. My wheelchair isn't really a conversation. You wouldn't just make a conversation about somebody else's legs. That's just weird. Hey, I like your legs. Your legs work really well. You wouldn't just say that somebody that utilizes a wheelchair. As far as because of my wheelchair, I don't really haven't had any specific positive experiences. It's usually not, like I said, a topic of question or conversation. I will say I did have a super positive airline experience. I know I spent some time trashing the airline industry as far as my experiences, but I will never forget when my family and I went to Washington, D.C. a couple years ago. Was it Washington, D.C. or Orlando? I don't remember. We had this man who was taking our wheelchairs. I was giving him the whole spiel that I give, please be very careful. This thing costs $30,000. This wheelchair is my legs. I cannot be without this for any length of time. Please, please, please take care of it. And he's like, yep, will do. And he was a super nice guy, but I didn't expect him to go to the extent that he did. I got on the plane and I was sitting in the chair, and the guy that loaded my wheelchair underneath the plane came back to my seat on the plane. We got out his phone and he took a picture of how perfectly my wheelchair was stored underneath the plane. How he made sure that it was perfectly taken care of. That was really cool. I never had somebody go that extra mile, and he wanted to give me that comfort to know that it was safe and that it was in one piece and not dented and damaged. And he said, I just wanted to show you that your wheelchair is perfectly tucked away, perfectly safe, and it's in great condition. I made sure that they took great care of it. The fact that he took the time to take a picture with his phone and show me so that I could have that peace of mind was really cool. Because as much as I get excited about reaching my destination when I travel, it's also the most anxiety-driven part, because as we're landing, the first question in the back of my mind is, I hope my wheelchair is in good condition. I hope my wheelchair made it. The fact that he took the time to do that, give me that peace of mind, was really cool. That may have seemed like a small thing to him, but for me, something I'll never forget. And I'm still talking about it to this day, obviously, to you guys, since obviously he's probably not watching this. Just taking the time to care, even if you think it's small, you know, for something like that, for me is a really big deal. And so I'm grateful for people like that. And unfortunately, because of my countless number of damages that my wheelchair has undergone, because of the carelessness of others, makes the positive experiences a big deal. Positive experiences shouldn't be a big deal. They should be the norm. Unfortunately, they're not. That's just the reality of it. So those were the questions that you guys asked me. So I just wanted to share a little bit about my history with my use of a wheelchair. I never want you guys to feel sorry for me that I have to utilize a wheelchair as a form of mobility. Question or comment that I get is like, it must be fun to utilize a wheelchair. I don't think of it as fun, and I don't think of it as bad. I just think of it as my form of mobility in my legs. Don't say to somebody, it must be fun to walk. It must be fun to walk around. You just don't say that because that's normal, but for me, this is my normal. Society has told me that, Michaela, there's no physical way that you could be a happy person because you utilize a wheelchair, because we say in order to be independent and happy, you have to have the ability to walk. And if you don't have those things, then you can't live a happy, successful life. And that's not the case. I'm so grateful for my wheelchair. My wheelchair, again, is my freedom and token to living a successful and productive life. Without it, I would not be able to accomplish the things I have, not be able to go the places I've gone. I would not be able to travel the country. I would not be able to be sitting here making these videos about my life. I mean, I get them from my bed, but I wouldn't be able to talk about so many of the things I talk about, because without my wheelchair, I wouldn't have had the experiences that I've had. It's not a barrier. It's not a restriction. It is freedom. It is life. It is a necessity for those that need it. I never want you guys to use the context of me being happy despite a wheelchair is viewed as such a negative word and such a negative thing, and it's the biggest blessing in my life. I'm able to live the life that God has me to live because of this, and He's given me this as a tool. This is the biggest tool in my toolbox. I never want you guys to view my life as less important or less productive because of my wheelchair, because it's more productive and successful than it ever would be without it. Sure, there are challenges that come with it. Like I said, it breaks down. It's not always reliable. And there are places I can't go because I have to utilize my wheelchair. That's not my fault. This is the way that I was born, and I'm grateful for that. And time for society to embrace that, and to embrace me, and embrace the way that I'm mobile, and embrace the way that I ambulate. I don't know what this video is. I don't know how. It's probably my most all-over video ever. I just know that society views the tool that I have as a barrier. Nothing makes me more sad than that, because I would not live the life that I live without it, and I love the life that I live. I wouldn't trade my circumstances for the world. I wouldn't take away my circumstances for the world. And I wouldn't take away the perspective that I have, and I'm grateful to live in a country where these tools are so widely available, because I know in other countries there's so many children that don't have access to these tools. I don't take that for granted. Just know that this isn't anything for me to feel sad about, because this gives me my life. My camera battery is about to die, but I just wanted to give you my perspective on what it's like to utilize a wheelchair. And I don't think of it as this big event like a lot of people do. Oh, you use a wheelchair. I don't say to someone, oh my gosh, you walk. I don't think of it as this big thing in my life. I think of it as get up in the morning and live life. If you guys have any other questions, I apologize at how all over the place this video was. I wish that this is something that's one of the hardest topics to articulate, and I think that's why I put off making this video for so long. But I hope it was helpful. And just don't ever feel sorry. Somebody that has to utilize a wheelchair or for any reason, don't feel sorry for them. Don't feel sad for them, because obviously they are much happier probably than you would be if you were in that situation. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.